With most backpacking equipment, I choose items I know I can rely on and which will do what I require for the trip. It's not difficult with most things, but one I have a big problem with and a bugbear about are sleeping pads. Now, sleeping pads might seem to be a simple choice. You need one, so you take one, you sleep on it. But over the years, I've found all sorts of problems relating to comfort, durability, weight, and of course, cost. Now, when I began backpacking, there was only one choice, and that was a closed cell foam mat, and like this one, flat foam, getting on for a centimetre thick. Now a mat like this insulates quite well, except in really sub-zero temperatures when you need two of them. They are inexpensive and they're very durable. This one is years old and still going strong. However, the disadvantages are comfort. They're not very comfortable, really. There's not much softness there. On bumpy ground, they won't even out any bumps. If there are stones, you will feel them through it. So from that comfort point of view, they're not ideal. They're also, as you can see, quite bulky. They end up being, strapped on the outside of packs. You need a much bigger pack than usual if you're going to store it inside. But as I say, they do have advantages. And the latest ones, of course, like this one, are patterned for supposedly more comfort. I don't actually find there's any significant difference. And another advantage with this type of mat, any sort, is you can cut one in half if you want to have two short mats. You can cut a piece off if you want a sit mat. They're pretty well indestructible. You can't puncture them. You can chuck them on the ground. You can use them on any sort of ground. I mean, this is a very thin one here, which I'm using because the ground is wet. So it keeps my trousers dry and gives a little bit of insulation. And also, recently, you can get chairs like this, which are basically an insulating mat with straps, so you can turn it into a seat. You can sleep on it as well. This is also quite useful, but as a sleeping mat, just the same as the others in terms of comfort. And as you can see, still quite bulky. Not as bulky as a full width closed cell foam pad, but it still takes up a fair amount of room. Now, these mats were, if you like, superseded by self-inflating mats like this one, which is very old, a style. I don't think they make this model exactly like this anymore. These are more comfortable than closed cell foam. They can be punctured, so you have to take a bit more care with them. They mostly self-inflate, though it's accepted that if you want them to be very firm, you have to blow in a few breaths. And, comfort is reasonable. I use one of these on a lot of long distance walks and it lasted pretty well. As you can see, they're still, you know, quite bulky. There's not a lot of difference between those. However, they are easier to store in that because they're much softer when not inflated, you can put them in a square like that, which I usually do, and put that down the back of the pack. I don't carry one on the outside anyway because of the risk of puncturing it. You can see this one's been years ago punctured once. I patched it. It's been fine ever since. But certainly I had my first one of these mats lasted through something like two very long distance walks. Continental Trail, the length of the Canadian Rockies was fine. It was an early type with a metal valve which eventually gave way and couldn't be repaired. This is the replacement for it. But then along came airbeds, and airbeds are much more compact, as you can see, and much more comfortable. But they're a little more difficult to inflate than a self-inflating mat, because you have to either blow them up yourself completely, or you have to get a pump, or use a stuff sack. It takes a bit longer, but they've become just about the standard for backpacking. However, they're much more prone to puncturing than the self-inflating mat, and when they puncture, there's no insulation at all. Because this has got foam in, you've still got a little bit of softness and a little bit of insulation under you, even if it's punctured. With a mat like this, you haven't. And these are the ones I have the biggest bugbear with, because over the years, I've had so many fail, usually out in the wilds when it's really awkward to try and repair it. There's no particular, I'm not talking about any brand here. I've had failures from mats from 6 different brands. So it's not the brand that is at fault, it's the design. And in fact, on 3 long distance walks, I managed to get to borrow off someone a replacement mat, and each time it was one of these. But to say the advantage of these are, without a doubt, certainly for me, they're the most comfortable mats. You can pitch on bumpier, rougher ground. They easily, iron out those bumps. And from that point of view, they're brilliant. But I don't trust them anymore. Because I don't trust them anymore, I always carry a closed cell foam mat as well. So that might be compact, but I end up carrying that in order to have a backup if that fails. Certainly in summer, when it's warm, I carry this thin one, as a backup, but I no longer rely on one of these on its own. Too many failures. And I really wish someone would make a still light but tough one of these that you don't have to baby in order to keep it working. Now, I am thinking, because I'm getting so fed up with these basically deflating in the middle of the night and depositing you onto cold, hard ground, that I'm going to go back to a self-inflating mat. I find these so much more reliable, although not as comfortable, that I will probably use this one again, perhaps get a more up-to-date, lighter weight one, and this thin pad, which I tend to carry on day trips as a sit mat, basically, and to essentially stop using these except for short overnight trips when I'm quite happy, you know, to carry a foam pad as well. Another factor with mats is how much room they take up in the tent. Now, what's always talked about is the length. Will a full-length mat fit in a tent? Will 2 full-length mats or 2 full-width mats fit in a tent? However, another important thing is how much room do you have above your head? With a foam mat, you can see here, I mean, I've got tons of room. Now, I'm using this tent because it pitches in at first, so it's easier to see the headroom than when there's a fly sheet coming down here. And this tent, as far as I'm aware, is the first one designed to take into account the thickness of mats. This is the new HD version of MSR's long established Hubba Hubba, but they have raised it, allowing the thick mats, like a lot of self-inflating mats, which can be up to 9 centimeters or more thick, raise you up, and in some tents that means your head's hitting the top, whereas with this mat, which is actually a bit under 1 centimeter thick, it's not really a problem. With a mat like this, which is 2.5 centimeters thick, it doesn't make a big difference. But once you get onto it, inflatable mats, then you can be raised up enough from the floor that suddenly you haven't got as much head or even shoulder space, which is something to take into account, you know, when choosing a mat. How much headroom do you have in your tent? I'll give an example. One of my favorite tents that I did a little video on and I've used an awful lot is the Hillybird Acto. Now, most of my use of the Hillybird Acto has been with a mat like this, and I never noticed any problem with headroom or lack of space inside. However, using it with a thick inflatable mat, I suddenly found it feels a bit cramped in here, because it raised me up enough that suddenly the walls were closer, the top was closer. And so that is something to take into account. I won't use an inflatable mat with the Acto again. With the Acto, I'll definitely be using this or equivalent in order to restore the headroom. Well, I think that's the end of my thoughts on mats. As you can tell, I haven't found an ideal mat, and mostly these days I've been carrying 2, though I may well go back to just carrying one of these outside of winter, when having a foam pad is a backup. When you're sleeping on snow and frozen ground, you really don't want to have your mat fail. And I hope you found that interesting. If you've got this far, and you did, please subscribe, and I'll be back with another topic soon.